It all started with a speech, a 5-minute segment, a single moment that was never meant to go viral. Karoline Leavitt had been invited to speak at a policy summit in D.C., one of those glossy, high-profile events packed with donors, reporters, and Beltway insiders pretending not to check their Twitter feeds during the panels. The theme, Speech in a Polarized Era. Most guests played it safe, carefully crafted remarks, polished applause lines. But Karoline, she had other plans. She walked up to the mic in a navy blazer, straightened her notes, and paused just long enough to look the cameras dead on. Free speech isn't just for the popular or the powerful. It's for the kid in the back of the class who's too scared to speak up, because someone told him his values are dangerous. No one moved. She kept going. We are raising a generation of self-censors, not because they're timid, but because they've been trained to fear disagreement. The room stayed quiet. A few awkward coughs. A moderator shifted in his seat. Karoline leaned in. We don't need safe spaces from ideas. We need leaders with the spine to face them. That line was the one that caught fire online. It was clipped, captioned, and looped 1,000,000 times within hours. And not everyone liked it, especially not Senator Chuck Schumer. Within a day, whispers began to swirl on Capitol Hill. An anonymous aide leaked an email chain showing senior Democratic staffers discussing platforming consequences for what they called rhetorical extremism. Karoline's name was on that thread. Then came the pressure. Speaking invites pulled. A think tank rescinded a roundtable slot. A major network canceled her scheduled appearance, citing scheduling conflicts. None of it was officially linked to Schumer, of course, but everyone knew. The silence wasn't accidental, it was engineered. But if Chuck Schumer thought Karoline would disappear quietly, he was about to be very, very wrong. By the end of the week, Karoline's inbox looked like a war zone. Canceled appearances, speaking engagements postponed until further notice, and a growing list of high-profile pundits echoing one word: divisive. It was textbook political freeze-out. She had seen it happen to others. A conservative voice gets too loud, too direct, too inconvenient, and suddenly they're dangerous, controversial, or worse, a threat to democracy. That last one? It was now being tweeted by staffers close to Chuck Schumer, but what they didn't count on was how Karoline responded. She didn't retreat, she doubled down. From her home studio in New Hampshire, she went live that Sunday night on her own stream. No producer, no filter, no approval script. Let's be crystal clear, she said, staring straight into the lens. This wasn't about public safety. This was about silencing a young conservative woman because she refuses to sit down and stay quiet. Clips from her stream were picked up by conservative influencers within minutes. Within hours, she was trending. Again, this time, not as a guest, as a threat. The next day, during a routine press scrum, a reporter lobbed a casual question at Senator Schumer. Any response to the claims you're trying to suppress Karoline Leavitt's platform? He laughed, one of those tight D.C. chuckles laced with calculation. I don't know who that is, he said. Big mistake. That line turned into a rallying cry. Within the hour, Karoline's supporters had clipped the footage and plastered it across every platform with the caption, "You will know her name." That night, Leavitt Unfiltered was the one trending topic on X. What began as a quiet purge was now a full-blown backlash, and Karoline wasn't letting go. She didn't just want her voice back, she wanted the microphone. Karoline wasn't just fighting back, she was planning her counterstrike. Her team, mostly young and scrappy staffers who knew how to weaponize a headline, had already booked her on 3 independent shows by Monday. But Karoline wanted more than airtime, she wanted impact. If Schumer wants to pretend he doesn't know who I am, she told her media strategist, then let's make sure he hears my name on every network, every podcast, every panel for the next 7 days. By Tuesday, she had an invitation to speak at a live town hall in New York, the heart of Schumer's political territory. It was hosted by a rising media outlet that didn't flinch at controversy, The subject? When free speech becomes a target? Perfect. What Schumer had orchestrated as a quiet professional suffocation was rapidly evolving into Karoline's national moment. She wasn't just surviving the attempt to silence her, she was thriving in it, and that terrified the old guard. The night of the town hall, protesters gathered outside the venue. Some held signs accusing Karoline of stoking division and undermining democracy. Inside, though, the seats were packed, mostly with young conservatives, moderates, and even independents, curious to hear the woman Schumer had so publicly tried to erase. When Karoline stepped onto the stage, she didn't open with statistics or buzzwords. She opened with a name. "Senator Schumer," she said calmly into the mic, "since you claim not to know who I am, allow me to introduce myself." The crowd erupted. "I'm the young woman your team tried to cancel. I'm the voice you tried to mute. Not with debate, but with bureaucracy, and I'm not going anywhere." The moment was electric. Cameras flashed. Social media lit up. Even journalists in the back row looked up from their phones. Chuck Schumer's gamble had officially backfired, and Karoline Leavitt was just getting started. The day after the town hall, Capitol Hill was buzzing. It wasn't just the speech. It was the reaction. Clips of Karoline's fiery monologue flooded the morning shows. Even anchors who previously dismissed her were now forced to acknowledge one thing. She had command. She had momentum, and she wasn't backing down. Chuck Schumer, meanwhile, was trying to pretend none of it mattered. But the whispers in Senate offices told a different story. Junior staffers were now quoting Karoline's town hall speech in private policy briefings. Conservative senators were referencing her line, "I'm not going anywhere," during floor debates. And the emails? They weren't just leaks anymore. An internal memo surfaced, marked sensitive, showing that Schumer's office had contacted 3 media outlets before Karoline's cancellations. The story was no longer about what Karoline said. It was about what Chuck Schumer did to stop her from saying it. By Thursday, a sitting congresswoman, known for sparking cable news chaos, formally requested a House subcommittee to investigate coordinated censorship of political speech. Karoline had gone from being silenced to becoming a symbol, but she wasn't satisfied with just attention. She wanted action, and she knew exactly how to keep the fire burning. Her next move? A nationally broadcast debate. The network? Reluctant. But after the ratings spike from her last appearance, they couldn't say no. Her opponent? A surprise. One of Schumer's closest allies. A legacy Democrat with a long media trail and a short fuse. Karoline had studied him. She knew his talking points, his deflection tactics, even his nervous tics. As she sat down in the makeup chair before the broadcast, a producer leaned over and whispered, "You sure you want to do this? He's going to come at you hard." Karoline didn't blink. "So will I." The cameras rolled, and the gloves came off. The lights hit hard. The studio air was crisp, charged, like a thunderstorm just waiting to crack. Across the stage from Karoline Leavitt sat Representative Martin Caldwell, a longtime Democratic voice, close ally to Senator Schumer, and no stranger to televised battles. The host barely got past introductions before it began. Caldwell: "Ms. Leavitt, with all due respect, what you're calling censorship is just consequence. Words have impact." Karoline smiled. Not a polite smile, but the kind that says, "I've been waiting for this." Karoline: "Consequences? Like coordinated emails, last-minute cancellations, and backroom calls to networks? That's not accountability. That's orchestration." The crowd stirred. Caldwell adjusted his tie. "You're playing the victim card, Ms. Leavitt. No one's afraid of your words." "Then why," she shot back, "is everyone working so hard to erase them?" It landed like a gut punch. The moderator blinked, momentarily speechless. Caldwell reached for the stack of notes in front of him, a move Karoline had already anticipated. She leaned forward. "Let me save you time. I know what's in those talking points, the polls, the op-eds, the carefully worded rebuttals. I've read them all, but none of them change what happened. Your side tried to erase me, and now you're angry that it didn't work. There was no coming back from that line. Clips hit the internet before the segment even ended. One tweet racked up 3 million views in an hour. Headlines flooded social media. Leavitt shreds Schumer ally in live debate. Karoline strikes back and wins. Inside the studio, Caldwell knew he'd lost control. He tried to pivot to safer ground, infrastructure, party unity, whatever he could grab, but it was too late. The momentum was hers. After the segment ended, Karoline stood from her seat, calm and composed. The producer approached her with wide eyes. "You just nuked the format," she nodded. "I didn't come here to play nice. I came here to be heard." And she had been, by millions. But Karoline wasn't done yet. Her next appearance would make the last one look tame. And this time, Chuck Schumer wouldn't just feel the pressure. He'd have to answer for it. The fallout from the debate wasn't just digital, it was political. That night, Karoline Leavitt's phone exploded, not with attacks, but with support. Lawmakers, media figures, even a few on-the-fence moderates who had kept their distance were now texting her, "You won." By sunrise, her team had uploaded the full debate to every platform. The title? "They Tried to Silence Me. Now They're the Ones Running." Within 24 hours, it hit 10 million views. Schumer's press team, meanwhile, scrambled to control the narrative. They issued a dull statement about ensuring responsible discourse and avoiding inflammatory rhetoric. It backfired. "Inflammatory?" Karoline responded on her live stream that night. "You call facts inflammatory when you can't control them." Then came her boldest move yet. She announced she would hold a public hearing, streamed live, titled "Free Speech in the Age of Political Gatekeeping." And she issued a direct challenge. "Senator Schumer, you've called for hearings on everything from Twitter bots to refrigerator emissions. How about showing up for one about the First Amendment?" It was the clip that broke the internet. Major networks couldn't ignore it anymore. Suddenly, anchors who had once brushed her off were asking, could Karoline Leavitt be the next serious national voice for the right? Schumer, silent. But his silence was louder than words. The next day, a protest staged outside Karoline's event backfired when a heckler's mic caught him admitting, "They're afraid she's going to become too influential." That clip went viral too. Karoline wasn't just resisting censorship, she was redefining it. This wasn't about media anymore, it wasn't even about Karoline. It had become a referendum on the entire political establishment. And Schumer was the face of it, and he knew it. Because while Karoline was building a movement, he was watching his grip on the narrative unravel. Behind closed doors on Capitol Hill, the conversation shifted from strategy to damage control. Karoline Leavitt was no longer just a media disruptor. She was now being discussed in national security briefings, not because she posed a threat, but because her message was cutting through in a way few expected. Schumer's allies were livid. Their carefully curated messaging was collapsing, and the polls showed it. A majority of voters under 40, even some moderate Democrats, now said they believed Karoline was being unfairly targeted by the political elite. And just like that, the narrative flipped. But Schumer wasn't done. He pulled strings, fast. Suddenly, Karoline's upcoming university event was flagged as under review due to heightened security concerns. A scheduled interview on public radio was postponed indefinitely. She received a warning from a committee chair that her recent rhetorical escalations might have ethics implications. It was coordinated, and it was desperate. But Karoline? She didn't blink. Instead, she dropped something no one expected. A leaked memo from a congressional communications director, directly naming her, outlining how to quietly restrict airtime and apply soft pressure to deplatform. It was dated 2 days after her first viral speech. "They didn't want a debate," she said in her emergency press conference. "They wanted a digital blacklist. And I'm not just fighting it for me, I'm fighting it for every American who's ever been told to sit down and shut up." The press conference was supposed to last 10 minutes. It went on for nearly an hour. Reporters asked if she was planning to take legal action. Others pressed her on whether she would run for higher office. She ignored the noise. Her only focus was exposure. "I don't need a title to be a problem for them," she said with a smile. "I just need the truth. And I've got it." The backlash against Schumer intensified. Commentators who once dismissed Karoline now admitted, this is what leadership under fire looks like. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, Schumer's advisors pushed him to go on the offensive publicly. His response? "She wants a spotlight. I'm not giving it to her." But he already had, because the spotlight was no longer his to give. It belonged to Karoline now, and she was just warming up. Karoline Leavitt wasn't backing down. In fact, she was just getting started. Days after the viral confrontation with Representative Caldwell and the avalanche of media fallout, Karoline made a bold announcement. She would be hosting an open forum in the heart of Washington, D.C. No script, no moderators, no filters, just a live mic, a stage, and every question thrown her way. The venue? A century-old theater once used by presidents to rally wartime support. The symbolism was intentional. Tickets were gone in under an hour. The crowd outside stretched for blocks. Supporters, critics, reporters, students, influencers, and even a few curious members of Congress. Protesters waved signs calling her divisive. Supporters shouted back with chants of "Let her speak." Inside, the energy was electric. Karoline walked onto the bare stage wearing a calm, focused expression. No flashy intro, no warm-up speaker. Just her, a single chair, and the roar of a crowd that knew they were watching something bigger than politics. For over 2 hours, she took questions, real questions, from every side of the political spectrum. Liberals challenged her, conservatives cheered, and independents listened. She answered each one directly, without spinning. When asked for proof, she showed it. When asked for motivation, she gave it. When asked why she was risking everything, her answer stopped the room cold. Because political survival is meaningless if it means surrendering your voice. The audience went silent. Then the applause came. One question stood out. A young college student, barely 20, took the mic and asked, "Why do they hate you so much?" Karoline didn't miss a beat. "Because I'm not afraid of them. Because I'm not on their payroll. Because I remind them of everything they can't control. A young woman who doesn't need their permission, who doesn't apologize for what she believes, and who can't be bought." Thunderous cheers erupted. The clip hit social media within minutes and was retweeted by major political figures across the spectrum. That same night, Chuck Schumer's office issued a carefully worded press release affirming his ongoing commitment to unity and respectful dialogue. It was tone-deaf. The internet tore it apart. Karoline didn't even need to respond. Her words had already done the work. This wasn't just a PR win. This was a shift, a seismic generational shift in how political power was perceived. She had cracked the establishment's armor, not with money, not with party backing, with truth. She didn't need approval, she had the people, and Washington was officially on notice. The days that followed were anything but quiet. Cable networks scrambled to book Karoline. Pundits who once rolled their eyes now leaned in. Even networks that had previously blacklisted her were suddenly re-evaluating their guest criteria. But Karoline wasn't rushing into anything. She had seen this before, how the media loved to build you up only to break you down. So, she flipped the script. Instead of doing a cable tour, she announced her own live-streamed address, direct to the people. No commercials, no anchors, no interruptions. Just her, a camera, and the truth. Over 20 million viewers tuned in within 48 hours. It wasn't a rant, it was a reckoning. "This isn't about me anymore," she began. "It's about the fact that speaking freely in this country now requires courage when it used to be a right." She laid it all out. The coordinated censorship attempts, the back-channel emails, the universities trying to cancel her talks, and the networks pressured not to air her content. names, dates, receipts. She didn't accuse, she exposed. And then came the line that lit the internet on fire. If this is what happens to someone like me with a platform with a camera, imagine what they're doing to you when no one's watching. Mic drop. That clip was shared by everyone from truckers in Iowa to tech CEOs in Silicon Valley. Even people who didn't agree with her politics couldn't deny what she represented. Unapologetic, unfiltered resistance to controlled narratives. Chuck Schumer? Still silent, but behind closed doors, reports leaked that he was furious. One source claimed he called her a digital wildfire we can't contain. Meanwhile, Karoline announced a speaking tour, not in coastal cities, not at elite universities, in Middle America, community centers, town halls, gymnasiums, places forgotten by D.C., but remembered by her. Every stop, sold out. And then, just when things couldn't get any more surreal, a whistleblower from a major social media platform dropped internal emails showing that Karoline's name had appeared on a shadow banning list. Boom! The story exploded again. Karoline responded with just 4 words on her X feed. "I told you so." Trending again. Polls showed trust in major media dropped 12% in 1 week. Trust in Karoline? Higher than ever. Even some old guard Republicans began calling her the future of the party. But Karoline wasn't talking about parties. She was talking about principles, and Washington had no idea how to handle that. By now, Karoline Leavitt was more than a viral moment. She had become a movement. Capitol Hill staffers whispered her name in meetings. Journalists debated her impact over coffee. Students wrote term papers about her. Even the late-night hosts, once quick with punchlines, suddenly grew cautious. Why? Because the usual narrative tricks weren't working anymore. She didn't fit their mold. Karoline wasn't playing to a base. She wasn't towing the party line. She wasn't begging for approval. She was drawing a line in the sand, and people from across the spectrum were stepping over to stand beside her. That's when the real surprise came. Chuck Schumer, under immense pressure and plummeting credibility, requested a televised discussion, not with Karoline, but about her. The panel was packed with academics, strategists, media insiders, and one unexpected guest, a former White House communications director who had previously worked hard to silence her behind the scenes. Karoline didn't wait for the invitation. She crashed the panel, live, with cameras rolling. She walked calmly onto the set, greeted each guest with a nod, and took the empty seat meant for a policy analyst who had mysteriously canceled minutes before airtime. The host, blindsided, tried to cut to commercial. Karoline raised a hand. "No need. Let's talk." And they did. For the next 40 minutes, she dismantled every argument thrown her way, not with outrage, but with evidence. When they questioned her motives, she pulled up timestamps. When they accused her of self-promotion, she reminded them she'd turned down 6 book deals. She didn't grandstand. She stood her ground. At one point, a pundit said, "You've made a lot of powerful people very uncomfortable." Her reply? "Good, that means I'm doing something right." By the end of the segment, the room was quiet. Even the host looked impressed. Karoline stood up, shook hands, and walked off without another word. That clip broke viewing records. Again, Chuck Schumer never mentioned her again, but her name was already etched into the political lexicon, not as a disruptor, not even as a rebel, as a force. She returned to her grassroots tour, turning down countless D.C. invitations, not out of pride, out of purpose. She had proven her point. You don't have to be loud to be heard. You don't have to be liked to be respected, and you don't have to play the game to change the rules. By the time the next election cycle began, dozens of young candidates across the country cited one inspiration. Not a president, not a senator, a 20-something firebrand who refused to sit down when told she didn't belong. Karoline Leavitt didn't just survive Washington. She rewrote the playbook. They tried to silence her, they tried to shame her, they even tried to erase her. But Karoline Leavitt didn't just stand her ground, she made it impossible to ignore. In a world full of scripted talking points and carefully managed narratives, she chose raw truth. She chose the people, and the people chose her back. This wasn't about right or left, it was about courage. And in the halls of power, courage speaks the loudest.